Throughout history, there have been many myths about language acquisition. Many of them said that children develop one or more languages much faster and easier because of the critical period in which their brain is on its most flexible range, and they are more motivated to learn a language because the environment provides endless situations in which children are forced to acquire the language.
Therefore, psychologists from that time reinforced this myth, such as Chomsky, with his theory that language is something that comes in our DNA, and when the child is born and comes into contact with the outside, begins to develop this ability.
On the other hand, Piaget supports the myth that children learn faster and easier, because he said that children acquire a language by imitating sounds and giving meanings to things. An example is when children see an object and hear someone saying its name. They will store the information about that object in their memory and begin to associate the sound with the thing, leading them to acquire language over the time.
Those myths had been part of the large list of people ideas about language learning. Most of those ideas talk about how a child learns a language in ways that sound pretty simple, but all those ideas are not true. They were just assumptions. Then, how does a child acquire a language? It is important to provide a child with tools that help to acquire language, or they can just develop language by themselves.
To answer the first question, we have referred to Vygotsky, who established that the learning of a language is a mix of three stages. The first one is thinking, which is a pre-linguistic stage where children create an idea and formulate it in the brain. The second one is language, which is a pre-intellectual stage where children express previously processed thoughts in the brain. And finally, linguistic thinking, which Vygotsky defined as the stage where children learn to give meanings to the information received from others.
Despite multiple analyses and theories, some other psychologists have explained the process in which a person acquires a language and communicates. They define this process in three psychological dimensions: phylogenetic, ontogenetic, and microgenetic dimensions. Like phylogenetic dimensions explain the process in how children acquire the language from their historic and cultural context. Also, the way this operation helps them to behave and develop communication. Ontogenetic dimension explains how children develop and build their psychological functions. And lastly, the microgenetic dimension defines what mechanisms and processes are used to develop the ontogenetic functions mentioned before.
To answer the second question, is it essential to provide children with tools that help them to acquire language? Or do they develop language by themselves? The answer is yes. We have to provide children with tools to develop the language. Those tools are natural and academic. When they are born, they immediately get an innate instrument to acquire the language, which are their parents, the people that assist children with their first needs and teach them to talk. Then, while growing up, they face schools and social relationships.
An example of why we have to provide those children tools for language development is the case of Ginny Wilde, a lady that was born in a family where his father was a violent person that strapped her into a handmade straitjacket and tied her to the chair in a silent room of a suburban house. He did forbid her to cry, speak, or make noise, and had beaten and growled at her like a dog. She was for around 13 years old, in which the little lady didn't have contact with the outside world. She faced outside the world when her mother escaped with her from their house and sought out services for her own health.
Ginny did not know how to talk or express ideas or feelings. She just knew less than 10 words. Once a psychologist noticed it, she was put into rehabilitation to provide her with communicative skills. During the time, Ginny could use words, she could not produce grammar, she could not arrange these words in a meaningful way, supporting the idea of a critical period in language development. After a year of treatment, she even started putting three words together occasionally. For children going through normal language development, this stage is followed by what is known as a language explosion. Children rapidly acquire new words and begin putting them together in novel ways.
Unfortunately, this never happened for Ginny Wilde. Her language abilities remained stuck at this stage, and she appeared unable to apply grammatical rules and use language in a meaningful way. At this point, her progress leveled off and her acquisition of a new language helped. So, taking into account the case of Ginny Wilde as an example, we can conclude that it's important to provide a child with tools that help to acquire language, since they are not going to be able to develop it by themselves or without outside work control.
To conclude, talking about language acquisition, we can establish it as a process in which the organ in charge of developing the language is the brain, which is the most important mechanism in language acquisition, because it is an extremely complicated machine that uses different components to make a sentence, to express an idea, and to comprehend what others are saying. Therefore, we must mention that the brain is receiving an increasing amount of information to use while a person is growing up. Hence, humans need the years to develop the language to make themselves understood.